interested. I know we have a lot of combination of folks. Hopefully, what we want to do tonight is really just give you an overview of um, uh, the role of the trustees and kind of give you a little bit of background about the library community and how libraries are organized in Massachusetts. I have been with the agency for about 8 years, and I have the pleasure of managing the group that Al is in. And as Al said, we have a lot of services to directors, trustees. We also do outreach to friends groups, foundations. We have a specialist who works on preservation issues. Also, one of our consultants is to the special population. So if you've not heard of the MBLC before tonight, please feel free to contact us on any kind of library related issue. We really are here to help. So I'm going to also remind Al to record. Oh, you did record.
I
was so
did.
focused on it. I didn't even hear it. Okay.
The second I stopped speaking, I saw my giant Post-it and hit that button.
We've had some recording blankouts in the past. We're both guilty.
All right, so now I'm going to try to find the screen sharing so that we can start. Okay, so you want to be a library trustee? Pretty sure that's it, and we will get this to, let's see. All right, let's get this to presentation view. There we go. Okay. This looks like we're on the wrong slide, but other than that, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So welcome again. Rob and I just introduced ourselves. So Rob, would you like to start us off by what we're going to talk about tonight?
Sure thing. I'll get us going and then talk a little bit about the work of the MBLC and kind of the organization of libraries and some of the organizations that are going to be relevant to your library staff, but also really something that will come up and is trustees should know about them, because we're going to kind of paint a picture of the full service of public libraries in Massachusetts. And then Al is going to get a little bit more into the nitty gritty and talk about the statutory authority and responsibilities of trustees as they're given. And then we hopefully, and I'm sure we will have time for Q&A. I will say, if you have an idea or a question and you don't want to lose it, please put it in the chat. We'll be monitoring that. We know sometimes that if we move on, you might not remember till the end. So always feel free to use the chat to log in the questions that you do have. So let's get going then. So the MBLC is a independent state agency organized under the executive branch. We are celebrating our 135th year this year. A great kind of like library nerd bar fight that you can have is start talking about firsts. And so we claim to be the first state library agency, not the first state library. Big distinction there. But if you really want to get into the great arguments, if you're in a collection of people from all over New England, start asking who had the first public library. That always gets people fired up because everybody claims to have it. So, but we are the oldest state library agency. And we were really formed at the beginning of the public library movement, to help organize, develop, and promote public library services throughout the Commonwealth. If you go to the next slide, how we do this is we really want to create the environment where public libraries are strengthened. And so what we want to do is, one of the big things that we try to do is create that infrastructure that allows libraries to thrive. And this can be done through resource sharing, technology support, and also support of services that they offer to their patrons. We do provide specialized library services and support for the blind and physically handicapped residents. As I had mentioned, we have on staff specialists in many areas that will be helpful to public libraries, including preservation and archives, also services to special populations. And so it's something that we are here as a resource, and also kind of as a voice for the public libraries in Massachusetts. Go to the next slide. You can find out more at our website at mass.gov/MBLC. On that site, you'll find there are some very particular spots on the site that can steer you towards. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll notice there is a tab for trustees. And that's kind of the gateway to a lot of services and resources that we have for trustees. So that is always a good starting place. This is also a place where you can get contact information for all of our staff. So if you want to reach out, you have an issue that you want to have questioned, please feel free to look at our listing. You'll have Al and my email addresses to have in your record as well. And again, we'll field pretty much anything. We're not the library police. We really are a consultative and advocacy group. We may not have the answer you're looking for. We may be beyond our authority to come down and mandate things. But what we'll do is give you the best practices that we know of. And also we have a great overview of what's happening across the library community. So we can bring that to bear if you have a question of how other folks are doing things and how things are getting done. Other things that you can find on this site that are super helpful, you'll notice the box sort of in the right-hand side, kind of halfway, the library directory. We maintain a directory of all libraries in Massachusetts. You can search by town or by library name, and it's a real quick way to get key staff, names of trustees, and links to websites. So take advantage of that as we maintain that. The other thing I want to point out on this main page right below the library directory is the MBLC blog. And Al won't say it herself, but Al has been crushing it. She has had a great series called Fortifying Your Library, and it has covered a lot of different topics of interest, from funding to library use during recessions, to how to best position your library for success. So that's something that is a great resource for folks to take a look at and share. Okay, next slide. So public libraries in Massachusetts are a little unique. I don't know if folks are from other states, but we are very locally organized. There are some other states that I've been in and been working with in my past, and a lot of states have a big county-wide system organization, but that's not the case in Massachusetts. We are really, really keyed and organized under local municipalities. Of the 351 municipalities in Massachusetts, there are 369 libraries. There are a few towns that have several different association libraries that are servicing towns. So it is very much on a local level, meeting the needs of local people. One of the big things that we do at the MBLC is we do have a voluntary library certification and statewide resource sharing program. And if your library is certified, then you are able to get direct aid from the state through state aid program. So that's something where your director will be very busy. I think that just closed out. I think August and September is the busy times for state aid. We have a online reporting system that libraries fill out. And so you might touch that in your time as a trustee. But again, we're really key on getting the resources, getting things to folks at the local level. So I've been talking a lot about resource sharing, and in the next slide will show one of the backbones of this, and that is the 9 library automated networks in Massachusetts. You may know already what your network is, but the networks that we're talking about are things, you might know CW Mars, you might know CLAMS, you might know Minuteman Network. These are separate organizations, their own 501c3. They are membership organizations, and they have their own boards. The MBLC supports the 9 networks through funding from the state. And again, we're really funding the infrastructure that make these networks work. What's beautiful about the network is that any person can walk into any library, and if that library does not have an item, they can request it from other networks. And in most cases, they'll find their item delivered to that library, their home library, within 3 days. And so that's that, again, resource sharing. It really, in effect, opens up the millions of holdings of libraries to every citizen in Massachusetts. And two other organizations two other folks that I want to point out that make that network strong are the Massachusetts Library System. And we will refer to them as MLS. That's what your library staff do. They, one of the key services they provide is that delivery service. So they're the organization that on a daily basis, and I think they move somewhat of 2 million items a year to libraries across the Commonwealth. And depending on the size of the library, you may get daily deliveries, you may get another schedule, but they run that. They also run really what is the professional development arm of Massachusetts libraries. So library staff can go to MLS and take courses on a variety of topics. It could be library management to HR systems. They have a really interesting series that has been going for a while on AI. So they're really responsive to the library community and seeking out topics that are relevant to running libraries today. Kind of another kind of nuts and bolts thing that you may or may not run into is the Commonwealth Catalog that we fund. And that is the mechanism to discover books from other libraries so that you can see what other libraries have. So it's a key step in that resource sharing part. So that's kind of an overview of how the library system is organized and what some of the key organizations and functions are that impact your libraries on a daily basis.
All right, so in terms of actual library trustees, this is really kind of cool, actually, because library trustees, their authority is embedded in Massachusetts general law. Specifically speaking, Chapter 78, this little red arrow is pointing to Section 11, where it says Board of Trustees, Powers and Duties. This basically gives trustees the governing authority over their libraries, any associated reading rooms, the budgets that are given to the library and assigned through the municipality, and any additional things that are distributed to the library. Now, the sections of Chapter 78, there are 4 sections that pertain to library trustees. There's 10, 11, 12, and 13. 10 establishes that Massachusetts public libraries should have a board of trustees. It gives a few guidelines as to how that should be set up. Section 11 is kind of the big one where it outlines the powers and duties. The one that is a bit of, let's just say it's the part of the MGL that makes my job interesting. It is Section 13, which says basically that anything from the previous 3 sections can be superseded by a local charter or a special act, or libraries that are association libraries or 501c3 independent nonprofit libraries. In the case of a town charter, that means that the state generally will cede most of the powers that the library board has to the municipality if that's something that's laid out in that charter. In the case of an association or 501c3 library, the state allows the board a much freer range of powers. And this is just the very beginning of why it's important for library trustees to be involved in their local government and to know who the players are in their local government. If there is a charter or a bylaws change coming up and your municipality wants to change how the library is governed, Your library needs to have a seat at that table, whether you're invited or, as Shirley Chisholm said, you bring a folding chair. If you are coming into the board and a charter has already been established, or you're in a board that shares power with municipal governance, check for documentation about duties and powers. And this is going to be a theme that you'll hear from me a lot. If in the, not only in this presentation, but if you reach out to me with questions, you'll find that I refer to go back to your documentation, check your bylaws quite a bit. Look at your bylaws, see if there's any memoranda of understanding, commonly referred to MOUs, or some kind of statement of work that explicitly lays out who does what in those situations. Because if there isn't explicit documentation, there may be some room for negotiation and nudging some power back into the hands of the board. Now, if you're an association library, it's very easy to think that as technically you are a private company, it's easy to think you've got free range and you don't need to follow things like open meeting law or conflict of interest law because you're a private entity. But don't forget, if your library is certified through the MBLC and receiving state aid, your library is almost certainly receiving some money from your municipality towards your library's budget. That means your library is getting taxpayer dollars. It is always in the best interest of the library to be as transparent as possible with how you are spending that and ideally all library money, because transparency creates trust. And that trust is going to go a long way if your library ends up facing tough times. Now, if you're successful in joining a board, yay, here are some of the primary duties that you can expect to be taking on. First off, if your board orientation packet does not include your bylaws, request them or dig them out. You're going to need to know if you're an advisory board or a governing board. Advisory boards do just that. They advise usually people in power in their municipality, so the town manager, the city council, that sort of people. And they make recommendations about the library that ideally will be taken into consideration. Governing boards have the power to dictate how the library will be run and have the option to choose to take municipal administration recommendations under advisement. Usually in the interest of good relations among the municipality, it's usually a good idea to take those recommendations under an advisement. You are, however, not, if you're a governing board, under any obligation to do that. If the Board of Trustees doesn't have anything that falls under that Section 13 in the Mass General Law that I talked about, you're most likely a governing board. But again, check your bylaws because that's what's going to give you that definitive answer. Libraries that are 501c3 libraries are also probably governing boards and should also have bylaws for you to check. If there is a town charter or other type of ordinance that mentions the library, you might be an advisory board. Whether you're advisory or governing, you're likely going to have the same basic duties. The biggest difference is going to be your level of authority in those duties. So whether or not those duties are carried out smoothly depends a lot on your involvement in the local political process. Know who the players are in your city or town. Introduce yourself. If you've just become a library trustee, you now have a great icebreaker. Hello, I'm so-and-so, and I just became the latest library trustee at our local library. Once you've introduced yourself, exchange contact information so you can keep those local key players regularly updated on all the great stuff that your library is doing. I do have lists of suggestions. I won't get into that here, But if you are able to become a library trustee, I definitely recommend coming to the library trustee orientations that we offer generally twice a year. We have an advocacy section on that, and I give you a whole list of suggestions of keeping in contact with your municipal and state officials that don't involve having an ask of, oh, we need money. Um, it's also going to be helpful to have an idea of how your local government works, how municipal finance works, local budgetary pressures, personnel concerns. Ask other departments how things are going to get a sense of what's going on in your town. The point is to make sure that the library is at the table for all of the major town decisions, including and especially budgeting. You are probably going to have a part in the library's strategic planning process as well. And this is going to look different for each library depending on what path the director decides to take, but you'll likely be asked for input, usually via a focus group, a survey. You may also be asked to help out in running a focus group with community members. But when you're asked for input, your input is extremely important because the strategic plan is what's going to set the course for the library for the next 3 to 5 years. And it will inform aspects of your duties. So make sure you have a say in how the library is going to be moving forward. You'll very likely be tasked in hiring and evaluating the library director. This is important because you'll be choosing the person who will be carrying out and managing the day-to-day operations of the library. I'm going to pause there for a second just to point out that it is the library director that manages the day-to-day operations of the library. There are some trustees who come in with the best of intentions of, I want to pick out books, I want to do programs, I want to have input into all of this stuff in the library, and that's not the role of the trustee. I'm sorry if that's a disappointing, disappointing news for you. Operations is not the trustee's role. It's the director's role. So you're going to need to choose somebody that you trust to carry out the policies that you set, to enact the vision and mission of the library, to set out the strategic plan. And I just got a thing that I was muted. Can everybody still hear me? Okay. So you're going to want to choose somebody who can relate to the public and to the library staff with authority and compassion. And I may be biased because I'm a bit of a nerd about these things, but one of your most important roles is the creation of library policy. These are the documents that are going to govern the entire library. They should be clear, they should be simple, and most importantly, they should be legally enforceable. And this is something that you don't do alone. Your director will have solid input. Library policy is my particular brand of nerd bait, so you can always reach out to the MBLC at any time. I always also recommend reaching out to your town's legal counsel. Believe me, the amount of money that your municipality may spend on legal counsel looking over your policies is a lot less than they would spend on a very well-intentioned misstep in a policy that results in a lawsuit. And plus, writing policy is something that ideally you should get practiced with because policy is an ongoing process. You should be regularly reviewing parts of your policy binder so that nothing falls out of date or become irrelevant. Like, for example, and this is a real example, floppy disks in your library policy in 2023. All right, so setting policy, incredibly important, but advocating for your library is going to be your number one responsibility as a library trustee without a doubt. And this is why it's so vital that you become acquainted with your local government and, to a lesser but still important extent, your state legislators as well. So, allow me to introduce you to the municipal pie. This is going to give you the percentage of your municipality's budget that your library is getting. Um, so this particular chart is showing fiscal year 2024. I actually looked on it earlier this afternoon, and they are showing fiscal year 2025 now. Um, so you're able to get the latest information on that. You will notice the purple arrow is pointing to that itty bitty little slice of blue on that pie chart. That right there is how much of a total municipal budget that a library usually gets. And generally speaking, over 90% of the library budget is funded by the local municipality, and those budgets are set by the locally elected officials. On average, and these numbers are slightly different because the number that I have here on the slide versus the number that is boxed in here. I believe this is for one municipality, and this 1.24% number is the average of all of the municipalities statewide. But on average, libraries get about 1.24% of the entirety of the municipality's budget. And all of this for something that is an essential community service, something that is available to anybody in your community, and something that is not free, but is already paid for by your community's tax dollars, thus making it available to everybody. And only 1.24% of that is spent. So one great thing to do is talk to your library director about your library's return on investment. Because I guarantee you the return on investment is a lot more than what the percentage of the tax dollars that are getting put into the library. So this is why it's important to talk to and get to know your local municipal players, because they're the ones setting your library budget. They're the ones you're going to need to have a relationship with to, at the very least, make sure that that slice of municipal pie doesn't get any smaller. Now, I'm not under any disillusions that a library trustee is going to all of a sudden make that slice of pie go to a quarter of that circle. But you are there to make sure that your library has the budget that they need to be adequately staffed, to make sure that they have the open hours that can be accessible to the entire community. And whoops. So what Rob and I have just outlined for you probably feels like a lot. And I'm sure at least some of you are sitting there thinking, yeah, are you sure maybe I'm not right for this? You probably are, because everybody can bring something to your library board. And it's extremely important for the library board to have as many differing, diverse perspectives as possible. So you may be bringing in professional experience. Accountants can bring in great budgeting experience. Um, Boards usually need a treasurer. That can be extremely helpful. Somebody coming in with HR experience can be extremely helpful. Somebody coming in with nonprofit or publicity experience can go a long way. Don't discount what you can bring to the table in terms of what you've been able to do for work in your life. It's never, oh, well, I was just because I promise you there's something that you can offer. Um, Different cultural perspectives, financial insights, community context, even if you're just coming from a different neighborhood in your community than the rest of the trustees. Because ideally, your board should cover as many different neighborhoods across your town or city as possible. If your board members are all within like 3 or 4 blocks of each other, then you're not really representing the needs of your community. You're representing the needs of that 4 block radius with your library. So even just bringing in somebody from the other side of town can make a huge difference in what the library can offer and bringing that understanding of what people from the other side of town need out of their library. Um, Economic understanding, maybe growing up with different economic needs than you have now, or currently having different economic needs than the people on board. That can be a hugely enlightening perspective that can add a lot of depth to what a board can bring to its library. So never discount what you are able to bring because you are able to bring something. And I promise you, even if you are new, you are able to do something. So hopefully, we have actually gotten you more interested in being a library trustee. You can get more information about things like what the state requires or recommends for being a municipal board member. You can get some more information about municipal finance, how municipal government works on our resource guide that is specifically designed for library trustees. So the link, the link is here on the slide. Everybody who registered will get a copy of the slides later in the week along with the recording. But I think if he hasn't already, Rob will probably be dropping that into the chat shortly. So please feel free. That resource is open to the public. You don't need a login or anything to get there. Rob showed you where to get to it as well from our main page. Feel free to peruse. And once again, cannot stress enough. If you have questions, even if you are not a trustee yet, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. That is what we are here for. We are here to help you and help you help libraries. We love questions and we love hearing what people are doing for their libraries. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I will try to keep this slide up, but I will also include, again, you'll get a copy of the slides later this week when I send out the recording, but I will also include Rob's and my contact information in the email that I send out to everybody who registered as well. So that is what we have for you. I am going to stop the recording.